Windows to Go is the way to take your Windows installation with you on a USB drive. You then can boot any computer with this USB drive and work in the environment which is convenient to you and you know inside out, with all the applications installed and configured the way you need. One of the main use cases for Windows to Go is a backup setup. That is, if something happens to your main installation, you can boot from Windows to Go disk and recover your data. Windows to Go is not the only one solution for this, but in my opinion, because of the comprehensiveness, Windows to Go is the best approach. It is easy to get a Windows to Go installation going. There are multiple third-party tools for this, including Rufus, open source, written in C++, freeware and comprehensive third-party application. But what if you want to just not use any third party, or you are in a situation where installing a third party would be a problem for some reason, for instance in a controlled environment? Then are you out of options with Windows to Go? Actually no. In this video I want to show how you can create Windows to Go drive using only tools and services included in the Windows itself. Moreover, you may have heard that Windows to Go was a feature in Windows 10 Enterprise, but we don't need to downgrade to Windows 10 or to go to Enterprise. Instead, we will be using just normal Windows 11 installation, and I'll show you how to use those built-in tools to create a Windows to Go drive. Also today, for the installation of Windows to Go, we will be actually using Windows Server operating system, support for which is usually paid in many third parties, or it requires additional tweaking, and I'll explain you how to still do it and get it running with just internal tools.
The process consists of three parts: preparing the drive including partition tables, deploying the Windows files, and deploying the boot files. But before we begin, one prerequisite is to obtain the Windows installation you want to have on the drive. You may just use the ISO files you normally install Windows from, and that's great, because if you don't have one, you can download a server one for free from Microsoft's Evaluation Center. I will leave the link down there in the description.
To create Windows to Go, you need external storage. This can be a flash drive, SD card, a full-fledged external USB drive like this, and so on. Today, for the purposes of the video and to make it even more transparent, I will use this ST400 drive, which allows us to mount VHD images directly and as such make it very accessible and easy to boot from.
Let's start by connecting our drive to the system. Now, open a command line as administrator and launch DiskPart. At this point, if you're using a physical flash drive or an external USB drive, you can skip straight to the wipe phase.
As for me, I first need to create a virtual hard drive to put it on the device, and then mount it as an external USB drive. And that's why I'm starting with create vdisk command.
It takes a bit of time to allocate the space. This VHD will not auto-grow and has a set limitation of 32 GB. Here we can see the VHD created. Now I'll use the IODD interface to mount the VHD. Operating system sees it as if I just inserted a new external USB drive.
The next step, wiping, would remove all the partition structures from your drive. And it's not really necessary for our VHD, but let's do it regardless. It wouldn't harm.
Now we need to ensure that we are partitioning the drive anew. For that, we'll wipe all partition structures available on the drive. First, let's locate our newly attached disk. Here is our 32 GB disk. Now it's time to be very careful. We need to select this disk and then wipe it. Now the disk partition table is wiped out.
Now the next step is to create a partition table. We'll be using GUID partition table GPT for the simplicity of handling the hidden drives if we need to do so.
Let's make the empty GPT on our drive. The command is called convert because it can transform the existing MBR table to a GPT one, but in our case there is nothing to convert, so it just creates a fresh empty structure.
Microsoft, for modern UEFI PCs, recommends 4 partition type structure. But in our installation for Windows To Go, we don't really need to go that hard, and it's enough to have just boot partition and the Windows partition, which will occupy the rest of the space and will be available for us once we boot from that Windows To Go drive.
Let's start with the System or EFI partition. This partition will store the files the computer will use to boot, the Windows Boot Manager and diagnostic tools. We are creating the 100 MB EFI partition in the beginning of the disk. This will work for the majority of the cases, but on some drives, this will result in error about the size of partition. In that case, change 100 to 260. We'll need to work with this partition later, so let us have Windows see it. The partition appears as drive S. For now, we don't need to do anything to it, so let's create the next partition. It's the same sequence of commands, just pay attention to partition type, file system, and the mount letter. This brings us to the complete partition table we need: one small EFI partition to boot from, and a large Windows partition to host our operating system. For now, let's quit disk part.
To create Windows To Go, we don't need the entire contents of the ISO file, just one image file that's located inside it, so let's mount our ISO file to extract that image file. To mount, just double-click the ISO file and it will appear in the computer window. Pay extreme attention to the letter under which it is mounted, because we will need to use it in the following commands. I previously said that from entire ISO file, we just need one file. This is the file installed at Win. And in theory, at this point, we can just run the apply image command, and that's it. But here comes the gotcha. In this Win file, we have multiple editions of operating system. If we just run apply image command, unfortunately, it would just install the first index available. And in case of server, that would be something which is called server core, which wouldn't have UI. And as you may guess, for the Windows To Go installation, that's not the best thing to have.
Let's see what installation options we have and choose the right one. This command prints the details for the image. You can see we have standard and data center editions here, and both of them have the server core and the desktop experience options. Let's go with Index 2, standard edition with desktop experience. Now we know everything we need to know to deploy the Windows files: our Win image location, the index inside the Win that we need, and finally the location to extract our future Windows partition mounted as letter W. This process will take some time, ranging from several minutes to a few hours, so be patient. After the process has been completed, the Win is applied to the partition. Note that at this point you sometimes may not be able to open the partition through Windows Explorer once you close this window. This is due to some specific access permissions applied during the Win being deployed. If that happens, you can use dir command to inspect the files. This is nothing to worry about. The first boot will take care of it. One last step remains. To make sure we can boot from this partition, we'll use bcd boot command to create boot files and configure them so that we can boot from our EFI partition, and that will pass control to our newly created Windows partition. Here, bcd boot creates the boot files on our EFI disk we assign the letter S and points them to the partition currently identified as W. Since we're using GPT partition table, there is no need to worry about these letters later on. And that's it! It's time to boot from our new Windows To Go installation. Let's reboot and select our EFI partition as the boot source. And voila! The Windows post-install actions are ongoing. The operating system will reboot a few times, so make sure to either select the correct boot device each time or configure the BIOS appropriately. We are greeted with the standard out-of-box experience, and after entering some information we can finally access the administrator's login.
As a summary, we have successfully created a Windows To Go installation of the Windows Server on a removable drive and have successfully booted from it. Moreover, we only used Windows internal commands, Microsoft resources, and Microsoft learning materials to do this. I will leave a link in the description for the Learn page which explains these commands and how they can be scripted. I hope this video was useful and will help someone with Windows deployment processes. If you found it interesting, please leave a like and comment. Thank you for watching.